The widespread capture of German soldiers was one of the Red Army's most tenacious post-war operations at the close of World War II. In the last months of the war, many SS members died, and others were taken prisoner by the Allies. Many German troops frantically attempted to contact American or British forces, fully aware of the horrors the SS inflicted on Soviet civilians. The majority fell into Soviet hands, although some were successful. These soldiers, who had spent years being brainwashed into thinking that communists were ruthless, suddenly had to deal with Soviet imprisonment directly. The intention was not only to imprison them, but also to use them as slave labor to reconstruct the Soviet Union after the war. In these circumstances, survival was mostly dependent on physical fortitude and luck more than any humanitarian factors. The Eastern Front turned into a nightmare for Nazi soldiers as soon as the Battle of Kursk ended disastrously for the Wehrmacht. Fearing Soviet reprisals, German troops were brutally treated when they were captured. Those in black SS uniforms were rarely spared, despite the fact that numerous Wehrmacht soldiers and even some Waffen-SS units turned themselves in to the Soviets. When they noticed my uniform, they hauled me out of the line of detainees, stripped me, and beat me with rifle butts, chanting Babi Yar and Smolensk, recalled a captured SS trooper. Executions were the only legal proceedings available to SS members. While some were transported to labor camps, where survival was uncommon, others were shot on the spot. By early 1945, the Wehrmacht's Ninth Army was stranded close to Warsaw, and for many German forces, surrender was their only choice. Lieutenant Gerhard Keller recalled the commotion clearly. "We were freezing to the bone, outnumbered and outgunned. More guys were slain or disappeared into the snow every day by the Russians. The way inmates were treated differed according to their captors, their identities, and the situation at hand." In his account of his initial meeting with Soviet forces, Private Hans Meyer said, "They took away everything we had, including boots, watches, and other valuables. When one soldier objected, he was immediately shot. Mercy was not an option. The Germans were deeply hated by the Soviets, especially the Waffen-SS, who were identified as ideological warriors by their uniforms and tattoos. These men symbolized the atrocities of Nazi Germany to Soviet soldiers. Occupation. Major Friedrich Lutz of 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf was captured near Budapest. "Some men tried to throw away their uniforms, but it was useless," he remembered. "We were deceived by the tattoos on our arms." After being badly beaten, Lutz was marched to a prisoner gathering station barefoot through the snow. Less fortunate were many in Hungary. Wehrmacht troopers of the 24th Panzer Division were compelled to observe the mass execution of their superiors in the vicinity of Debrecen. Radio operator Wilhelm Hauer subsequently recalled, "To the Soviets, these deaths were just cleansing. Every commander was labeled a war criminal. Hauer survived by pretending to be dead amid the corpses. Not even senior officers were exempt. Army Group F commander General Maximilian von Weichs turned himself in to the Red Army in following the fall of his forces in Yugoslavia in early 1945. Because of his status, he was spared from execution right away, but he had to live in terrible conditions for months before being turned over to Western authorities. Less fortunate were soldiers at lower ranks. Prisoners were forced to march tens of miles on meager food to railway stations. Those who fell were immediately shot. "The march was a death parade," noted physician Karl Schaefer in his journal. "Dozens of men fell, leaving their bodies as signs of our journey. There was no sympathy among the Soviets. One officer said icily, 'The dead are simpler to count.'" Before arriving at their ultimate destination, the Soviet gulags, captured soldiers endured exposure, illness, and malnutrition while packed onto overcrowded cattle trains. An en route Wehrmacht soldier named Franz Keller, the odor was unbearable. Urine, sweat, and death all combined, Perm told Perm of the terror. "We shared snow and bread scraps in an attempt to keep each other alive. But it was not enough. The surviving SS men had nowhere to hide as the last struggle for Berlin broke out. Even Heinrich Himmler and other SS chiefs tried to negotiate separate peace agreements with the Allies when defeat was certain. Given their impending doom, several SS officers opted to commit suicide rather than be apprehended. SS General Wilhelm Mohnke assembled his forces for a final stand in one of the Berlin strongholds. Some soldiers committed mass suicide as Soviet forces overran their post. Their features were white but determined as they sat in a circle. While some merely gazed at the ground, others muttered prayers. As soon as when the time arrived, they silently swallowed the pills. I was unable to do it. Hours later, the Soviets apprehended me, a survivor recalled. While some attempted to flee or pose as citizens, Soviet troops persisted in their hunt for SS members. We knew who they were, even though they had destroyed their papers and changed into civilian clothes, according to a Soviet soldier who remembered discovering them concealed in a cellar. People cried for justice as we pulled them into the street.